Shana Tova, everybody. I feel better. Thanks for worrying. So you have a moment like that on the Bima, and you're grateful for having a surplus of cardiologists in the crowd. So thank you to all of you who came up to me to check my pulse. While we're on self-deprecation, I've never presented a concept at the high holidays that within only a year, 1 year, has become completely debunked, dismissed, and derailed. And not just any concept. In this case, it was a concept that I spoke about last year that I personally felt deeply connected to. I found it meaningful, and most of all, I found it consoling. And I want to explain what happened. Now, first of all, regardless of what country a Jew calls home, from Israel to India, whether the Jew has payas or tattoos, cholent or cheeseburgers, minyan 3 times a day to no other contact with synagogue life but 1 day a year, Jews flock to services at one specific time every year. And that time is? What time on Yom Kippur? Yizkor. I planted that with my kids. Yizkor. Yizkor is the most populated synagogue event of the year by far. And last year I plucked a single line from Andre Schwartbart's The Last of the Just, published in 1960, and I wove my entire Yizkor sermon around it. The line was, "We see by the light of dead stars." We see by the light of dead stars. It's not an illusion. It's not imagined. It is a fact. When stars illuminate the darkness of the sky and enable us to find our way, those stars are not actually there. They're not there. The past and the present somehow coexist. The light from those stars continues to illuminate us, but the physical star itself, gone billions of years ago. We see by the light of dead stars, and I said last year, being Jewish is exactly like this. Is it not the light of the departed that guides us, that provides us clarity in the moment of decision? Is it not the past that guides the Jew into the future? And the past exists not merely as some recollection. The past is not a memory. The past is an ongoing reality for the Jewish people, and a simple glance upwards at the stars reminds us of this, and that time is peculiar. We see by the light of dead stars, and last year I claimed that that's why Jews flock to synagogue at Yizkor. Jews estranged from Judaism, they feel compelled because someone, or several someones, continue to illuminate their path, though they themselves are gone from physical view. We read the poem at Yizkor, "As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us." And though we remember them daily, it's how we remember them at Yizkor, that emphatic exclamation point, regardless of what we may be doing all year long, that exclamation point that we are Jews. And a 3,300-year story is wrapped up inside of each of us. 1 year and one giant technological leap later, that idea is probably irrelevant. So I ask you, if death no longer means the end of physical interaction, what happens to Yizkor? And not just the day, that idea, 3,300-year story wrapped up in the Jewish people, inside of each of us. And if existential questions like, is there life after death? Well, what if that question becomes irrelevant? What happens to religion? I'll take it a step further. To be created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, is to possess a nefesh, a soul. That mysterious feature that makes me, me, and you, you. Consciousness. That is our link to the divine. What happens if we can recreate the nefesh? Conjure consciousness. If we can do that, what happens to God? Sounds crazy. It is not. Within a decade, Yizkor services may be empty. And empty because people may not see them as necessary. They may not see religion, Judaism, as necessary. Belief in God as necessary because God will have been repurposed to a machine. Now, 6 years ago, I introduced you to something called the Dad Bot. James Volholz's father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, but he wanted to keep his father alive. So he took his father's oral history, 91,970 words, transcribed onto 203 single-spaced pages, and then he got creative. Now, you haven't heard of this one. Eliza was the first, designed by MIT computer scientist Joseph Weissbaum in the 1960s. You do know Eliza's progeny, Alexa and Siri. But that technology pervades every aspect of our lives. The technical term is a chatbot. They're automated friends, they're virtual assistants, they're customer relations specialists. James Volholz, he created a digital dad, a dad bot. And his father lived long enough to actually see the prototype. He watched his wife exchange text messages for over an hour with a virtual version of himself, primed with anecdotes, private jokes, personal information. It made the conversation believable, and if you want to see it actually, you can watch a video on Wired.com, where James Volholz pulls out his phone and he texts, "Hey, Dad." In the video, you see James messaging with his virtual dad. And he's giggling at a joke and he's tearing up at a story. At one point he says, "Ha, that's totally my dad," confirming a witty response. But when James texts his creation, the simplest of questions, "Do you love me?" the text back is, "I can't love you. I'm a bot. But I know your real father loved you very much." Well, things have changed, my friends. Now, Dr. Michio Kaku, he is not a crackpot. He is not a fringe scientist. Undergrad, Harvard, doctorate in theoretical physics, Berkeley. Revered by his peers as one of the most significant contributors to theoretical physics. Recipient of the prestigious Sir Arthur Clarke Lifetime Achievement Award in 2021. Author of a book many of you read, New York Times bestseller, called The God Equation, A Quest for the Theory of Everything. And within the last year, he and his intellectual equals have been fixated on one single subject, that subject being digital immortality. And he speaks on it constantly. Podcasts with other scientifically inclined minds, lots of acronyms before their names, after their names, brilliant people, reputable in their fields, and they're talking what seems like science fiction. Kaku references something called the Connectome Project. This sounds insane. This is real. It maps the pathways of the entire human brain. All our memories, all our quirks, personalities, everything. Digitizes it. Then you sprinkle it with a little advanced artificial intelligence. Then you sprinkle it some more with an avatar. A digital 3D picture of yourself, for those of you that don't know what that is. You can be any age in that avatar. And then the person on the receiving end, they have virtual reality sensors. And suddenly the dad bot from a few years ago, texting program, can't love because it's a bot. All of a sudden it is now a lifelike duplicate of a loved one in every way. And moreover, you're going to be able to physically hug this person. According to Kaku, and others as smart as him, he says, our great-grandchildren are going to be able to hit a button, interact with us as if they were here right now sitting in the sanctuary. We live by the light of dead stars no more. From now on, stars live and provide light forever. And our kids are going to question the relevance of Judaism and the relevance of God. Artificial intelligence, theoretical physics, quantum physics, cosmology, all of it advancing at light speed, pun intended. All of it chipping away, sledgehammering away at this idea of a higher power, of God, of Torah, of Judaism. And so 5784 and beyond, not just for us, but for our children and their children, in the era of AI, we're going to be required to make a case for God and a case for Judaism. But I can't make it. I speak Jewish. I don't speak science. For this argument to be convincing, it has to be made by individuals who speak both languages, who have mastered both disciplines. And so I introduce you to a man named Brian Keating, born in 1971 to two Jewish parents. His birth name was Brian Axe. His biological father, James Axe, was a world-renowned mathematician. But his father abandoned the family when Brian was 7. And his mother remarried an Irish Catholic man named Ray Keating. And Brian would take his name. Ray Keating was a devout Catholic. He had 10 siblings, and they each had a gaggle of kids of their own. And this Irish Catholic family welcomed Brian, welcomed his mother, welcomed his older brother with such love, graciousness, humility. An abandoned 7-year-old suddenly had an extended family of 100. And Brian, he admits he became enamored by it. Now, at that point, when he's 7 years old, his relationship and knowledge of Judaism was minimal at best. And it was based upon you can't do concepts. His least favorite being, as a boy, you can't eat that tasty bacon. And then he traded it all in for Christmas and for Easter and 50 cousins constantly around. And at the traditional age, where he should have been learning his Torah portion and preparing for bar mitzvah, Brian Keating was an altar boy in the Catholic Church. But at the exact same time, Brian Keating was saving money to buy his first telescope. Why? 1986, he'd woken up in the middle of the night, noticed a bright light outside his window. He knew there was no street lamp there. He opens his shades and he sees the moon, so overwhelming, shining like he'd never seen before, and he didn't know why. And there was something next to the moon, like a fragment had splintered off. No Google to check what it was, no internet. So he just stares, curious, for hours. And then he waits till Sunday edition of the New York Times, which prints its Cosmos section. And it says that there was an unusual summer moon, and it was accompanied by a rare sighting of Jupiter. And this kid at 13, Brian Keating, becomes obsessed with the sky. With the sky. Today, he's a professor of astrophysics at the University of California in San Diego. He invented the groundbreaking BICEP telescope. He's the author of 100 scientific publications. He's still a Keating. Still close with all those relatives that loved and nurtured him when he needed them most. But he's also the only human being ever to observe Shabbat, ever to keep kosher, ever to wear tefillin at the South Pole, which is the home of one of his most prolific observatories. So I need to know, what happened to Brian Keating? He was a devout Catholic, and then he looked up, and something inspired his journey back to Judaism. Moreover, how does he reconcile this with being a part of the science community? For those of you that don't know, if you're a part of the science community, belief in a higher power, belief in God is anathema. If you come out as a believer in God in the science community, you're talking potential professional suicide, because that community is based on data. But Brian Keating speaks often and openly about Judaism, about Torah, and he's simultaneously unlocking the mysteries of the universe. He looks just like you and I. No beard, no payas, no black hat. He doesn't wear a kippah in public, but he's observant. He practices. He's deeply spiritual. Now, Karl Marx, you know it. He said religion was the opiate of the masses. Why? Because a crutch the average person needs to lean on to feel some sense of purpose and belonging. It was an excuse, according to Karl Marx. Brian Keating's no average person. He's one of the smartest people alive. But the more he dissects the universe, the more of a believer he becomes, and he's not alone. He runs in a circle of geniuses. Eric Weinstein, mathematics from Penn, PhD, mathematical physics from Harvard, professor, MIT. Lex Friedman, PhD, computer science, focus on artificial intelligence, Drexel University, professor, MIT. Jeremy England, Harvard, Oxford, Stanford, PhD in theoretical physics, professor. Yes, but now he teaches at Hebrew University. MIT to Hebrew University. They all have their own podcasts. You should listen to all of them. Most of their podcasts are deeply sophisticated. They target the science community, but every once in a while they host each other and they have conversations with each other, nonchalantly sharing stories about Shabbat dinner and its value for family positive dynamics, the power of Pesach Seder and Jewish memory, why Jewish ritual matters, and they pepper these conversations. Again, these are the smartest people alive. And they're having conversations with vocabulary words like tshuva, kiddush, tzedakah. And they're throwing these words out as if everybody listening to the podcast understands what they're talking about, but obviously don't, only we do. And these are not yeshiva-educated, religious from birth Jews. They're world-renowned scientists who have been magnetically pulled towards Judaism the more science they study. And they're talking openly about it. Watstein goes as far as to say human beings are not meant to be atheists. We're meant to be religious. Now, Jeremy England, when he got his PhD in whatever astro-cosmo metaphysics that he got it in, he's got his PhD, and somebody, like the butterfly effect, refers him a book written by a guy you know, Jonathan Sachs. He's already an adult. He reads the book, his first exposure to sophisticated Jewish philosophy, the depth of Jewish textual tradition. Off he goes on a Jewish journey. He's now an ordained Orthodox rabbi. What happened to these people? These are the ones who aren't supposed to believe in God. You shall love the Lord your God, all your heart, all your soul, all your might. It's a commandment we recite twice a day, and it is completely unnatural. How can emotion be commanded? All of you at B'nai Aviv, I command you at 8:20 this evening to love the New England Patriots regardless of what your previous past is. And I can't do that. You gotta love country music. I can't do that either. You've gotta love the opposite political party. I can't do that either. Yet every day, twice a day, we're commanded to love God. And that's the exact question that was asked. How do we do this? By the most famous Jew ever to tightrope the balance between science and Judaism, Maimonides, preeminent. He was an astronomer and a medical personality of the 12th century. By the way, he was Saladin's personal physician. And he asks in the 12th century, how can I do this? What's the way to fulfill this mitzvah? How am I supposed to love God? How do I get there? He asked that question. And he asked that question in his corpus of Jewish law called the Foundations of Torah. And he answers it in a strange way. Exhaustive, impenetrable, scientific outline. I did not understand it because he's talking about the elements, the human body, the physical, the metaphysical, over and over and over and over again, scientific treatise. And then after it he says, when a person contemplates everything that I just wrote, when they learn what I've described, when a person immerses themselves in the study of science, in the study of the natural world, when they contemplate all the facets of creation, its vastness, its complexity, when a person simply looks up, they're going to understand and appreciate the creative entity that we call God. He understood. Science is not just compatible with spirituality. Science is the source of spirituality. And he goes as far as to say that if an individual does not possess a basic fundamental knowledge of Madaloki, the science of how the world works, one cannot come to an understanding of the mitzvot, the Torah, or of God. That's revolutionary. Think about the Haredi world that sits in yeshiva and does not have any exposure to secular subjects. Rambam says these people can never understand what God actually is because they don't know science, they don't know the world, they don't know nature. Brian Keating, Eric Weinstein, Lex Friedman, Jeremy England, all others who examine the universe, they come to the same conclusion that Maimonides did in the 12th century. But why don't they just leave it at that? And this is the flip. Science brought them to the possibility of a higher power. That should have been enough. Why frame that realization with a personality, in this case, the God of the Hebrew Bible? who, by the way, has very specific, particular demands that are really hard. Why not say there's a higher power? Why keep the Torah? Why is Brian Keating observing Shabbat, keeping kosher, wrapping tefillin? He still nostalgically recalls bacon, but he doesn't eat it. Why? Why did Jeremy England, who grew up in a small town in New Hampshire, zero exposure to formal Jewish education, why does he come to chase down the Talmud and embrace Judaism? Now, their answers, which I'm not going to give you the entirety of their answers because you don't have it, they have a podcast, a conversation, 90 minutes, just the two of them, talking about that question, where they ultimately agree. The Torah, they say, the Torah is interested in how to teach us to look for the hand of the universe's creator in events of our lives. It gives us the choice, and it gives us the opportunity to see God in the world. That's why you're supposed to make a bracha. That's why you say, Hamotzi lecha mina aretz. When we make a bracha, and we're supposed to make 100 a day, it's giving you the opportunity to simply acknowledge we're not alone. There's something greater than us, more powerful at play. So we're going to venture into this new frontier of technology. There is going to be a paradigm shift that's going to disrupt every facet of our society. And Jews like the ones that I've been talking about fascinate me, because they're brilliant minds and they're drawn to the efficacy, the truth, the relevance of Torah, not in spite of becoming scientists, but because they became scientists. Now, religion and science are different things. They do not negate one another. Listen to Jonathan Sachs, who started the Jewish journey of England. Englander, not the country. They are as unlike as poetry and prose, song and speech, a portrait of a person in an MRI. To put it at its simplest, Judaism science takes things apart to see how they work. Judaism puts things together to see what they mean. And we need them both. Judaism is about interpretation, science about explanation. Science analyzes, Judaism integrates. Science breaks things down to their component parts. Judaism binds people together in relationships of trust. Science tells us what is, Judaism tells us what ought to be. Why do we need science, he asks? Because we need to understand the world. If we're to honor God's purpose within it, we need to understand disease if we're going to cure disease. We need to understand the causes of poverty if we're going to alleviate poverty. We need to understand our destructive drives, especially on this day, if we're to rise above them. And religion, Judaism, what gives human life its meaning and purpose? The universe, as all of these scientists has confirmed, the universe is more than the result of an accidental fluctuation in the quantum field at the dawn of time, what you call the Big Bang. Human life is more than the unintended consequence of random genetic mutations blindly sifted by natural selection, what you call evolution. Just as there is something within us that is beyond the purely physical, so there is something within the universe. We call it the divine presence. That is beyond the merely material. And just as God created the universe in love, justice, and compassion, so God calls on us to create relationships of love, justice, and compassion, and that's what we're supposed to be doing today. We need both. Science to understand the universe, Judaism to guide our way within it. From the world as it is to the world as it ought to be. A world of peace, a world of justice, a world of compassion, a world of love, when we, God's creations, honor God, the Creator. Now, last year, in order to appreciate the 33-year story wrapped inside each of us, I asked you to look up. Remember that we're guided by the light of dead stars. That may not be the case in a couple of years. And so we're confronted with this new, strange reality, things like digital immortality, things like ChatGPT, things like artificial intelligence. But my request is the same. Look up. Maimonides, Brian Keating, Jeremy England, all of these masters of physics. The magnificence and mystery of the universe didn't unravel their sense of the divine. It reinforced it. Science is not, nor has it ever been, the enemy of Judaism. It is the gateway to understanding it. And so someday, a few years from 5784, You may be listening to a hologram of me delivering this type of very sermon. We're taking a technological leap and we're taking it together. But keep this in mind. The further we jump forward technologically, the more we're going to appreciate, understand, and have a love of God. That is what Judaism believes and professes. And so I look forward to seeing where this new frontier takes us all. I wish you a Shana Tova. Ask you to please rise as we continue with Musaf.